Hey YouTube, my name's Xuan, and today I wanted to bring you a branded Despia deck profile. I took this exact deck to YCS LA, the 250th, and I finished 95th overall, 9-3 after Swiss on day 2. You may also remember me from the round 3 feature, where I played against a Swordsoul opponent. And so yeah, just wanted to bring the deck and show you what it's all about. A couple things about this deck profile before I get started. First of all, obviously with the video, you can tell from this channel that this is not something I've done before. So the video quality is going to be pretty poor overall. I'm hoping to actually add more content either for branded Despia or for other things that I'm playing a little bit later on. So please give me any feedback, and yeah, we'll try to make it as good as possible. I'm going to show you the deck, and then afterwards I have a little bit of a tournament report where I can go over my rounds and what I finally played and what my losses were too. So I hope to include that as well. Alrighty, so I'll start with the main deck. This is a 40 card main deck, and I really wanted to make sure that it was exactly a slim 40. Before I start with the deck itself, I really want to talk a little bit about the theory for branded Despia. In particular, when you're playing branded Despia, I think the most important thing to talk about is how you're planning on playing through Ash Blossom. Pretty much, I know in the past, a lot of branded Despia deck profiles will talk about how they run 13 branded fusions, multiple ways to branded fusion, always want to have branded fusion. And when I was building this deck, I thought that was maybe not the right line of thinking because 13 branded fusions still lose to 1 Ash Blossom. So in particular, I run multiple ways to branded fusion, but I wanted to run an alternative line of play as well. And now in our new format, we have Blazing Cartesia, which is the second way to play after you get Ash Blossom. So assuming you get Ash Blossom and you're somehow able to access a Cartesia. Cartesia with any of your Despia names, Fallen of Albaz or Albion the Shrouded Dragon, will set up a branded red play, and you have the name as a target in the graveyard already. So if you get Ash on branded fusion, you can set up a branded red, hopefully Guardian Chimera them on their turn, draw 2 cards, and then you at least have a chance to play the next turn when they have one last Ash in their deck. And if they can't kill you through a Guardian Chimera, you're playing with a full 5-card grip. You're going to be able to at least have a second chance at winning. And so for a deck that loses so hard to Ash, that's what I chose to do to build my deck to maximize my access to both lines of play. And you're going to see that in a lot of the deck building choices as I go through. Okay. So let's go ahead and get started. Okay, that's the easiest way to do it. 3 Aluber. This doesn't really need explaining. It's your normal summon. It's your starter. 2 Tragedy. This is a little bit unconventional, and this is because I really wanted an extra name to maximize my Cartesia into a branded red setup as much as possible. As well, with branded fusion, I was always dumping Tragedy to access a Lubellion, and because the way I built this deck, I'm always bleeding hand advantage every time I try to make a fusion. I never wanted to send this from deck to get its effect to search. I never wanted to send this from hand to get its effect to search. I always wanted to send it from deck. So if I ever opened one, I thought I was going to lose too much hand advantage by not playing a second one. Then lastly, Ad Libitum. This rounds out the Despia account. The Ad Lib is really valuable in this deck, obviously, to set up that branded red play. But now that we have Blazing Cartesia, you can actually frequently use this in hand on your opponent's turn, and then be able to recycle your fusions that way. And then it still keeps your branded red live when it gets back to your turn as well in the deep grind game, because it's just in the graveyard as opposed to banished. So that's it for the Despia names. 3 Fallen of Albaz. I see a legitimate argument just to play 2 of these, and I can totally understand it. However, based on my previous justification for wanting to access that branded red play, I thought 3 was the way for me. I also found that going second, I really liked having Fallen of Albaz as a normal summon. If I was able to access my other engine, this really baited a lot of interruption and force reaction pretty much. 1 Albion the Shrouded Dragon. I didn't use this very much to send branded Retribution instead of that play, although it was really valuable to have access to that as well. The thing I did most with Albion was send down one of the Fallen of Albaz's, which is why I was happy I played 3. Sending down one of these so that I could set up a special summon of a Blazing Cartesia going second, or set up a graveyard for a branded red so I could use it on my turn to dodge targeting negation if I normal summoned an Aluber. But of course, it also does double duty as just doing your branded retribution play. If you have to use your Blazing Cartesia to fuse with a Serenir, this will get you the other half to get to branded fusion, and it basically helps you unclog your hand. I played 2 Blazing Cartesia. Again, I think there's a legitimate argument just to play 1 as well, but because I want to access both lines with high probability, I chose to play 2. And this card does a lot for the deck in terms of extending past Ash and giving you consistent interruption on your opponent's turn. The worst part of this, obviously, is that your previous best card, which was Guardian Chimera, doesn't do anything when you use Blazing Cartesia to access it. And then the last monster in the engine is Serenir. I just played one Serenir. This is good because it basically acts as a Foolish Burial Goods if you're able to fusion, if you're able to access the Dust Dragon. This you can send from the deck to send any of your branded spell traps. So basically the Dust Dragon then can either send any monster from your deck pretty much, or your extra deck, or via Serenir it can access any spell trap you want as well. There's 3 monsters that I'm not playing that I'm going to talk about very briefly here because I think it's worth addressing. Dark Magician, the Bestial Lubellion, and Tri-Brigade Mercourier. I'll start with Mercourier, which is the most obvious one. I don't really like Mercourier because it relies on you having Resolve Branded Fusion, and I think that's the biggest choke point for the deck already, so I really didn't want a card that was only going to be good if I had already Resolve Branded Fusion. As well, its other ability is to be banished off of Allure of Darkness, and that's really powerful, but I wasn't playing Allure of Darkness, so then I felt like I lost that utility as well, so I just decided to cut Mercourier, make a little bit more room in my extra deck without running Grimbrum as well. Alright, Dark Magician. So I'm not running Dark Magician because I didn't want to have the vanilla monster in my deck. Because you'll see later, I'm already running another vanilla monster. I didn't want 2. And I thought Dragoon was not particularly good going first. If you go first and you make a Dragoon, great, you have an Omni Negate, but it costs a lot of resources by discarding for every Omni Negate. And this deck already discards so much that you're running on very few resources. The good part about having Mirror Jade is that it constantly replenishes itself in the engine. Dragoon doesn't do that for you. So I decided Dragoon was only going to be good going second, and for something so niche, I decided not to play it. And then lastly, the Bestial Lubellion. I chose not to play the Bestial Lubellion because I decided I was always going to go for the Fusion Lubellion play, never the Albion play, unless I already had Branded Lost on the field. The reason I decided that was because Branded Lost would protect it from hand trap interruption, and without Branded Lost, I thought the Albion line was a little too vulnerable to hand traps. And since I was never going to go for the Albion line unless I had Branded Lost, then having the Bestial Lubellion in my deck doesn't do anything because its only target is Branded Lost. Okay. Let's move on to the engine spell traps. I have 3 Branded Fusion, heart of the deck right here. Definitely the most amazing card. 2 Branded Opening. This is a little unconventional as well. This goes back to my argument of I don't really care if I'm running 13 Branded Fusions if they all lose to a single Ash. So I really wanted to make sure I was accessing Cartesia as well as Aluber. And I didn't really like this card going second very much. I found myself siding out the 3rd copy almost every time. So I just decided to run it at 2. This is basically Branded Opening, but for Cartesia, Fusion Deployment. But it also does double duty going second by specialing out a Fallen of Albaz to potentially act as a board breaker. And then finally, typically people here will run, they'll run the 3rd copy of Branded Opening, and they'll run Foolish Burial and Gold Sarcophagus. And these are all basically different ways to access your Branded Fusion by accessing Aluber. And if it's Gold Sarcophagus, you can banish that Tri-Brigade Mercourier to get access to your Blazing Cartesia. I don't like those cards because I think they're really only good going first. If you get a monster and then you normal summon that monster or special summon that monster to get an effect, it's just, there's so many interruptions that can get thrown that way. Infinite Impermanence, Effect Veiler, any targeting negation on the field. So instead, what I decided was to run, but I decided that I wanted to run more consistency cards. Allure of Darkness was out for me as well because I didn't run enough Darks to warrant it. If I wanted to run Allure of Darkness, I wanted at least 20 Dark monsters in the deck, so that every time I activated Allure, I had a probability of drawing into 1 more Dark monster. So finally, what I settled on was running 3 Pot of Prosperity. I originally got this idea from Pack's video in the last format, during Tier Elements format, from his Branded Despia deck. At the time, I didn't think this was particularly good because it's basically extra copies of Branded Fusion trying to dig. However, I think now it's really fantastic because it lets you dig for your Cartesia or your Aluber, whichever one you don't have. But going second, you can use it to dig for side deck cards or additional board breakers. You'll see that on maining Kaijus. So this really does a lot for you going second, more so than Gold Sark and Foolish Burial, but it also accesses different lines of play that those 2 don't. I'll show you a cool little interaction with this and my hand trap lineup in a little bit. The last ones for the branded spell traps, I'm running 2 branded in red. Again, a little unconventional, but I found that I really wanted access to branded in red every time because it's what makes your board sticky. And if you don't have access, if you get Ashton branded fusion, hard opening a branded in red plus a Cartesia will allow you to extend quite a bit further. Sorry, not extend. It'll allow you to have a much stronger board breaking presence and hopefully survive till the next turn so that you can play again on your turn. 1 branded Lost, 1 branded Retribution. Lost is amazing, although honestly, when I was playing it, I didn't access this card very often. You'll see from my round reports that I played a lot of Kash Tira, and I sided out both of these into Kash, simply because it's really hard to do the Albion Serenir play under an Arise Heart. But anyone who's played the deck knows how good Lost is. It just breaks boards on its own. It turns your engine into board breaker. And branded Retribution recycles a lot of cards. In particular, it's valuable for recycling branded Expulsion, which I side, just so you can consistently access that Expulsion line. Unfortunately for the Gimmick Puppet, you know, it is what it is. Okay. And then lastly, I want to move on to the flex spots. So typically in branded Despia, there's room for about 6 to 12 flex spots, depending on how people build their deck. I went really thin on the engine, as you can see, cutting out a lot of things like Tri-Brigade McCourier. I don't run Kit, things like that, or Super Poly. So I had room for 12, and these are the 12 that I chose. 3 Ash because it's generically good, and yeah, pretty much just because it's generically good. I want to take a small aside right now to talk about what goes into the decision-making process for choosing these flex spots. Specifically for branded Despia, I think it's really valuable to have light and dark monsters that act as hand traps or board breakers. The reason for that is that they can be fused off for Blazing Cartesia if they're clogging your hand when you go first, as well as if they're monsters, they can be used as branded in red fodder for fueling a Guardian Chimera. And so I think this deck in particular really shines when its flex spots are light and dark monsters. So in that vein, I also ran the Gamma package. This was insane for me. So before settling on Gamma, these were originally Nibiru, and I really didn't like Nibiru into the format. I thought that there were way too many decks that could play under Nibiru, and it was just not very impactful overall. I hadn't thought about Gamma for a while, and then I actually saw a video, I believe it was Dingcam Fam, who talked about a really cool interaction going second into an Arise Heart, where you could Pot of Prosperity for 6 or 3 off the top, and if you happen to excavate a Gamma, after you resolve it, Pot of Prosperity gets banished, Arise Heart mandatory trigger, and you can immediately just Gamma the Arise Heart. And so long as they don't have the Infinite Track Goliath, that's just a really easy play to play into the Kash board. So that was pretty much enough for me. However, there's a really cool interaction with Gamma as well, because basically if you hard open the Branded Fusion, you can comfortably Branded Fusion, and if they ash you, you just Gamma them right in their face. There's a really good chance that you're going to be able to set up so many resources at that point that you're probably really far ahead in the game and you're going to win. However, another thing also works here because if you have Pot of Prosperity and a Gamma in hand, or any of these, any 2 of these 3, you can Pot of Prosperity, dig for the Branded Fusion, activate it, and then you still know you're protected under a Gamma. This is something that wouldn't be available to you if you ran that 3rd copy of Branded Opening and that Foolish Burial and Gold Sarcophagus, because all of those lead to monster searchers, and so that turns off your Gamma. So just an interaction that I thought that ended up working out really well for me. I did Gamma quite a few Ashes on my Branded Fusion, or Ash on my Pot of Prosperity if they thought I was playing Kash. Okay. 2 Radiant Kaiju, 2 of the Dark Kaiju. So I main deck these specifically for Kash Tira. The reason that I chose the Dark Kaiju, I think there's a legitimate argument for the Light Kaiju as well, is just because this one's under 3,000 attack. The branded deck seems like it has a lot of removal, and it's really powerful at breaking boards, but when you spend that removal, for example, like normal summoning an Albaz, you have to discard a card, or if you use a Mirror Jade effect, it's cooldown for next turn, so you can't use it again. You really don't want to waste your removal on a Kaiju that you give your opponent. So Branded really leverages the strong monster attacks to clear the board as well. And so I didn't want to run the light Kaijus because they were 3,300 attack, and I felt like I couldn't comfortably remove them every time without wasting resources into it. Okay. And then the last 3 flex spots, this sort of goes against the deck building theory I was just talking about, which is that I wanted light and dark monsters. But I specifically wanted some cards that were really good going first into Kash, but also good going second if I excavated them off Pot of Prosperity. And so for that, I was kind of debating between Imperm, Chalice, and Book of Moon, and I ended up settling on Book of Moon. This card underperformed for me pretty immensely throughout the tournament. I found, like, I wish I tested a little bit more, but I found that it was really only good into Kash going first. Going second, I was able to break the board really easily every time, and I really never needed this card. And there were so many situations where if this were Effect Veiler, aka a light monster that was a form of interruption from the hand, if this was Effect Veiler, I would have been sitting a lot more pretty. So, in an updated version of the deck, I'm making this Effect Veiler. Okay. And that's it for the 40-card main deck, and I'll hop to the extra deck now. Alrighty, and then on to the extra deck. This is pretty standard. I had 2 Albion, 2 Lubellion, 2 Mirror Jade. This is extremely standard. I mean, you run 2 because you access them and you don't want them ripped for by Kashtira. I also played 1 Albalinatus. This is a little bit not standard, and the reason I chose to play this one is because I wanted to respect Dragon Link. I have Bestial Magnamut in the side deck, so I felt like I could really access Fallen of Albaz really easily, and then this would just be a fantastic way to play into Dragon Link. With a diverse format, I didn't really know what to expect. In principle, I wanted to run 3 Albions, but this kind of does the exact same thing as Albion if you're just searching for a brand infusion. So I decided to take a little bit of a hit and not have a 3rd Albion and just run this guy instead. I was also playing 1 Titaniclad. This basically does what Rimbrum is supposed to do. By sending Titaniclad, so for example, if you shotgun a Mirror Jade because you have a Brandon Red setup, when you send a Titaniclad to graveyard, you basically threaten that you'll have a Fallen of Albaz at end phase. So it makes your opponent really play in an awkward line where they have to make sure that they're breaking your board, setting up, but also setting up something that can interrupt that Fallen of Albaz. And typically that becomes quite a lot of pressure. The reason that I chose to do Titaniclad over Rimbrum is because of its fusion materials. There were a lot of times where you could just get stuck with a Mirror Jade on the field, and then if you bring out a Fallen of Albaz, you want to be able to use your opponent's monsters for something. And there were no other cards in my deck where I could easily do that. By far the easiest one is Sprin, but I wasn't playing it. And so using Titaniclad as a fusion target for Fallen of Albaz to clear up the field was something that was valuable to me, and so that's why I played this one, as well as its special summon ability. I played 1 Dust Dragon. This card does everything for the deck because of fusion deployment, and I was trying to access this turn 1 every single turn. If you play the deck, that's exactly how you're supposed to play it, or at least, if you play the deck in a conventional way, that's how I imagine you're supposed to play it, because it gets you graveyard set up, it itself acts as an interruption, and yeah, it just does a lot for the deck. I really want to play a second one of this because I really didn't want to risk it getting ripped out of my extra deck in the grind game, or going second. I still wanted to be able to fusion deployment out a Cartesia, but with the overall extra deck space, I couldn't figure out a way to make it work, so I just played 1. The Despia infusions, 1 Masquerade, 1 Queritus, 1 Proskinian. You'll probably see from my, as you saw from my hand trap lineup, I ran a lot of lights, so actually this was very easy to access, and Proskinian was really good for me this tournament. I found that if I was playing into a board, the Monster Reborn effect was really valuable, and then being able to burn really closed a lot of the gaps for doing enough damage, so that if you did enough damage with Proskinian and you had maybe a Cartesia lying around on field, you could Cartesia in main phase 2 and turn it into a Masquerade. And that puts your opponent on a really tight clock because they basically have like 3 activations that they could use, or some very low amount of card activations in order to kill you. I thought that in our format, a lot of the current top decks have really, really strong grind games, so turn 3 onwards, they're able to rebuild their entire resource setup and continue to play past turn 3. It's not like something like Swordsoul, which once you break their board, their follow-up's a little bit on the weaker side. So I thought it was valuable to have a Masquerade so that when I crack their board, I can put them on a clock that they couldn't play freely. Last one I didn't talk about was Queritus. Queritus is alright. It's good into this format because it's not fusion heavy, and it does threaten an established board, because by zeroing out attack, you can always attack over the thing that's causing you the biggest problem. But I did find that overall Queritus was, it was alright. 2 Guardian Chimera. This is also unconventional. The reason that I play 2 is I personally believe that Guardian Chimera is the best monster that the branded deck has access to, and so if it's my best card, I would really rather have more than 1 copy of it. It does double duty because If someone, for example, contact sees you on any of your fusion monsters when you're trying to do your branded fusion play, having a second Guardian Chimera means that you can just make a Guardian Chimera. You won't get its pop or draw effect, but at least you've gotten that contact C off the board. But I like the insurance of having a second one instead of running something more specific like Sprint the Iron Dash Dragon. I like the insurance of having a second one so that I feel like in the grind game I can access my Chimera multiple times. Also because I play 2 Branded Red. The last point I want to note is Guardian Chimera itself is very strong into skill drain matchups. So I again liked having this so that if I had to use Cartesia, for example, to make a Guardian Chimera into a skill drain, if I somehow if I was able to resolve the Cartesia under a skill drain with a Book of Moon, this Guardian Chimera would actually threaten a lot on the board. And the last one was Dragos Depelia. This card is pretty standard in the deck, and it was really valuable, especially going into Kash boards. One thing I want to note about Dragos Depelia is that you can access it really easily now because of Blazing Cartesia. You can just go ahead and fuse with leftover fusion monsters or monsters that spent their effects, and make this Dragos Depelia on your opponent's turn during their main phase. You can also use the ad-lib that you search off your turn 1 combo with the Blazing Cartesia to reset your Dragos Depelia. Dragos Depelia is a soft once per turn, so if you do this to a Kash player, you can both hit their Unicorn normal summon, then if they happen to open Theosis and you have that, you can chain to the Theosis, and then once their monster hits the board, you can just Dragos Depelia them a second time, and it's pretty much game for sure. Okay, and finally I'll move on to the side deck. I expected a really diverse format. I thought I would play 5 or 4 Kash in day 1. I never planned on making it to day 2. It was really awesome. So, and then I thought I'd play like 5 others, like one-offs. And that's exactly what turned out to happen on day 1. So I built my side deck expecting a lot of diversity, and you'll see that right now. So I sided 5 Bestials, because this I thought was the single best card into Branded, but it also did double duty into FTK decks such as Drytron and Dark World. I wanted to have a lot of coverage for those FTK decks as well as the Gimmick Puppet lock, because obviously, you know, if you get hit with any of that, you can't play. So these do a lot of coverage into what I considered FTKs. I also had 2 Ghost Spell. This was again to cover the Silva Hand Loop and the Gimmick Puppet off the Expulsion. But the reason I chose Ghost Spells and not more Bestials is because it also hits Big Welcome Labrynth and the Runic Tuck Back to draw 3. I wanted to respect Runic and Labrynth a lot too because I feel like the deck really struggles against that kind of control style. And so I thought Ghost Spell would be enough to slow them down, that I could overwhelm them and basically get game in 1 turn before they could get their resource loop set up. I played 3 Dark Ruler. And so the argument for Dark Ruler, obviously, it's really good into Sprite, which Branded has a hard time going second into Sprite without board breakers, because Sprite makes a board that's extremely wide, and Branded's board breaking is somewhat more targeted. The thing is, though, I think Dark Ruler is really strong into Kash as well, specifically for the Branded Despia deck, and I'll explain why. A lot of people in Branded Despia will play Book of Eclipse, and they'll hopefully flip all of the Kash monsters face down. If the Kash player goes for the 3-zone lock to set up the 5-zone lock, or if they just go for a Rise Heart pass, I feel like Dark Ruler is much stronger. And the reason for that is, let's say they go for a really common Shangri-Ira, Diablosis, a Rise Heart, and then on your standby phase they special out a Fenrir. And so they've locked 3 of your zones, and the plan for them is likely that the first card you play, they're going to banish it off of a Rise Heart or Fenrir, and then lock the remaining 2 zones. If you hit them with a Dark Ruler, because for some reason you were able to open it, and then you have any way to normal summon Fall of Albaz or special summon Fall of Albaz. So specifically, if you have Fall of Albaz in hand or a fusion deployment, you basically Dark Ruler that board with a lot of threats, to be fair, like 4 legitimate threats. You Dark Ruler that board, you normal summon a Fallen of Albaz. You can fuse with either the Arise Heart or the Shangri-Ira, bring out a Mirror Jade, attack over the Fenrir, and then Mirror Jade effect banish the remaining Arise Heart or the Shangri-Ira, which is effectively clear the entire Kash board. Then in end phase, the Albion you sent down will add a Branded Red to your hand, and you can activate that in end phase, targeting the Fallen of Albaz you used as fusion material to make a Guardian Chimera in end phase. pop their Birth or their Diablosis, whichever one you think is more threatening. And basically, you've cleared your entire board without using Branded Fusion, without using Cartesia, or without using any board breaker that isn't Dark Ruler no more. If you have Book of Eclipse, that would not be possible because you can't fuse with their monsters when they're flip face down. So that's why I chose Dark Ruler into the Kash matchup. And then Dark Ruler also did a lot of work in the Sprite matchup, which I unfortunately didn't play, but that's the theory behind it at least. 3 Cosmic Cyclone. I sided this in every single time going second into every deck, and I also sided it in going first against Kashtira. This hits Birth and the Field Spell, which are key starters and extenders for the deck. But going second, I was really afraid of Grave of the Super Ancient Organism, and so I wanted to make sure I had coverage into that. I didn't get hit with it, except for my very first round, which I'll tell you about, but it gave me, having this gave me a lot of, it made me feel confident against Floodgates. And in particular, you probably saw in the feature match, actually, the last card my opponent activated was Anti-Spell Fragrance. So, having this for the Floodgate really made me feel a lot better. And then the last thing is the Expulsion combo. I think this is totally broken and super unfair, but, this is an auto-win button going first, so I thought I had to play it. I resolved this like 4 or 5 times maybe, and every time I won. I also sided in Branded Expulsion going second against Kashtira, but I didn't side in the Gimmick Puppet. Specifically because I found my deck was able to break through the Arise Heart Pass really easily. And then setting up a Branded Expulsion made it so that the Kash player had to do a lot of work to play back into my board because obviously they're clogged with a monster already. And that was pretty much it. Alright, and so I just wanted to provide a round report for the decks. So round 1 I played against Flunder. The guy actually showed up slightly too late, so he just got the automatic round loss. But we still played a casual game because he looked like he wanted to play, and yeah, we took it serious because it's our first game of the day, just got warmed up, but I ended up winning that one. Round 2 I played against Kash, I won that one. Lost die roll, lost game 1, had to reverse 2-0. Round 3 was on Swordsoul, was against Swordsoul, which was on the feature match, as you guys can see. And I won that one as well. Round 4 was against Kash. I lost die roll, lost game 1, I had to reverse 2-0 again. Round 5 was against Punk, which I thought was Punk Kash for a while, but by game 3 I realized it was just pure Punk with hand traps. And I ended up losing that one. It was a pretty tight game, but it is the way it is. Round 3 was Kash, I won that one. Round 7 was Mathmech, I won. Round 8 was Kash again, I won. And then round 9 was in the VIP area against the Labrynth player. Lost 1 die roll, lost game 1, and then I ended up losing a tight game 3 in time as well, so that was a little bit rough. And that's it for day 1. Day 2 was a really early start. Round 10 was Kash, lost die roll, had to reverse 2-0. Round 11 was Kash, lost die roll, and then I wasn't able to get the reverse 2-0 again, so that's the round I got eliminated in, picking up my 3rd loss. And then round 12, a lot of the X3s knew they were already out, but we still played it. And again, Kash, lost die roll, had to reverse 2-0 again. And then that's pretty much it for my tournament report. Alright, thanks for watching, and yeah, cheers.